I was
Okay.
at Hood from, let's see, 5 to 8, oh, 5
Oh,
to 8.
I gotcha. Then down to Fredericksburg.
No, so this was my final stop. I did a lot of stuff at Hood, and then I kind of bounced around for a little bit. I was at Stewart, I was at Benning, I was at Irwin, of course, multiple deployments. I was at Bragg, the Pentagon, and then closed out and just moved over here.
Gotcha. Yeah. Dang, man. So, how many years total?
20.
20 in the military? Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And it
Yeah.
was a long, short 20. I tell you, it's something.
A long, short 20.
Yeah. It's like going through it. It's like, man, this is taking forever. Then I'm looking back. I'm like, man, that went really quick.
It's weird how that happens, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. I feel honored that you jump on, and I'm inspired by you and what you're doing with the Frago 22. I know we spoke a little bit ago, and it's a great introduction. I've started following you at least on LinkedIn. Are you present on other social channels?
Yeah, but what you're seeing on LinkedIn is what's on the other social channels too. So you're not missing out on anything. And, hey, thanks for having me here. This is really exciting.
Yeah, of course, man. Well, hey, big episode number 6. Drum roll, please. Right? You got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. Hey, it's that first step that matters.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk first steps. Let's talk background, and the I'm always inquisitive about the early days of an entrepreneur, because it seems that those signs of that free spirited nature are something that are truly ingrained in you somewhere in childhood, whether you were born that way or whether, for the sake of entrepreneurs, there's probably some traumatic event or something like that you kind of get out of the box. But uh, a couple of things to note about your childhood might be what.
Oh man,
I know you
my
mentioned that
child.
kind of a closet nerd.
Yeah, my childhood was pretty typical. I was your closet nerd. Nintendo became a thing when I was young, so got introduced to that, and then of course, sports like any other kid outside riding the bike. When the street lights come on, I better be inside unless I want to get whipped. Kind of the
Yep.
basics, basic childhood, and then uh, as a young preteen, computer, we got our first computer in the house, and I loved it, and I started tinkering with it and got in trouble a few times for breaking it, and you know how that goes. And then kind of just, like I said, typical childhood, hit high school, did the sports things, but I was that closet nerd, like I said. So after sports, it was like, hey, I'm going to go try to build this computer. Hey, I'm going to go mess around with these electronics. And then, of course, 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school. So, or at least the year I graduated. And so I immediately joined the military, and lo and behold, took me on a journey that I never thought it would happen, especially because I didn't do anything electronic related. I was a scout, did all combat and reconnaissance, and loved, hated every minute of it. Because, plenty of days I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what I signed up for. And other times I'm like, what am I doing?
Did you have any um, preconceived notion of which direction you wanted to go in the military when 9/11 happened? Like, had you already thought about, Army, Marines, Navy, something like that? Or what was the catalyst for your path?
So I didn't. I kind of tinkered with all of them. I actually started my journey for the Marines. In terms of like, I talked to them first. I did the ASVAB with them, and lo and behold, a little part that very few people know is actually I didn't join the Army right away. I joined the Air Force first.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I did a few years with the Air Force, and then I had gotten out of the Air Force and went to the Army, and then stayed with the Army for the remainder of the time.
What deployments did you go on?
So when I was Air Force, I did the invasion. I was support for that, and then pretty much once I switched branches, I went to Hood, deployed with them for OIF2, and then deployed again for 7-8, and then went to Stewart, deployed with them for the closeout. So when OIF transitioned to New Dawn, did that deployment with Stewart, and then the Army was like, hey, we're going to give you a break. We're going to make you a drill sergeant. And so my break was being a drill sergeant, which I told them I'd rather be deployed than that, and they didn't listen. But so after that, I went to Fort Bragg, deployed with them for Inherent Resolve, and then I ended up landing a gig at the Pentagon. So I got to work with General McConville for about 3 years, and that was really exciting. That was really cool. And then I pretty much did some first sergeant time and said, you know what? Hey, I hit 20. It's time to go.
What a way to build a badass drill instructor, by taking someone with that pent up rage and keeping them chained up and focused on
Yeah.
the new recruits, right?
Especially when you find out you have drill sergeant orders while you're deployed.
Oh, sweet Jesus. Yeah. So you had mentioned before that as a kid you wrote your own fantasy story. How, was there any parallel to your actual experience after high school with the story?
No, not even close. So I did was dabbling in writing when I was younger in high school, and a lot of it's influenced by video games, of course. Growing up and kind of when PlayStation became a thing, I discovered RPG games and that whole story, like how it builds out. And so I started essentially writing my own little stories like that. And, being a closet nerd, Star Wars was huge. I mean, you want to talk nerd book? I'm wearing a GameStop shirt right now, if that kind of tells you my nerddom. So, yeah, that's kind of where it influenced, and just trying to figure out who I was creatively. And for the record, I'm definitely not creative. So it's probably a good thing that area of my life did not take off.
Maybe more of a technical writer.
That's probably still pretty dangerous territory. Look, the writing I'm doing now is all that LinkedIn, like, hey, let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about developing people and just real stuff.
Yeah, right. For sure. You recently, at least I think it's recently on LinkedIn, started posting some video content.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the premise. It's a check-in, like a midday check-in or an end of the week check-in. And your audience seems to be very specifically those transitioning from the military, at least from my perspective. So what's the impetus of this video series?
So actually, so funny, I have a bunch of videos before that, and it was more like podcast style, just me kind of talking about things, whatever's going on. And it kind of evolved into this checking in, especially on transitioning service members, because I get a lot of calls from them. And that's a good thing, right? I was getting calls when I first retired. I was getting calls from my old soldiers like, hey, I'm getting out now. Can you help me? What should I be doing? What should I be focusing on? So I wanted to keep that going, so people don't have to go it alone. The TAP process is very, individual results may vary, and more times than not, they're not very positive. And it's just not because they're bad people or anything. There's a plethora of information. You're trying to get it out to people. And then those who are separating during COVID, and, it became really messy, and you got a lot of great organizations out there, but separating the chaff from the flare and trying to figure out what is what and what's relevant right now versus later, it's tough. So I just wanted to do these check-ins with people to kind of like, hey, you got this, you're not alone, we're going at it together. There's plenty of veterans, we're all out here and we're in your corner, we're ready to help you out, and just kind of bring that hope that you're not doing this alone.
Well, you even did one recently. It was around Veterans Day, but I think it was a Friday or a Saturday night, and you just put it out there that said, hey, if you're in my area and you need a designated driver, give me a call.
Yeah, for the Marine Corps birthday, because being out here in Virginia, I'm right by Quantico, so there's Marines running around everywhere, and you don't want a Marine to lose his crayons, and especially after he's been drinking and it gets crazy. And
yeah. Oh, and the tattoo. there's a picture you posted of a tattoo on someone's calf. Is that your tattoo?
That is not my tattoo, but definitely got permission to use that tattoo, and it's a very proud Marine. He will protect his crayons at all costs, and
Yeah, I'll have to flash that image up here during the podcast for sure.
yeah.
But what a fresh voice of solidarity you are, being Army, but also supportive of all of the service members across all the branches, and that is so important these days, in
Mhm.
particular with issues with military transition, issues with the VA, so many political issues. Obviously, the suicide rate is alarming to say the very least.
Mhm.
So, from that perspective, how do you speak across the branches in that unified voice, and how do you get through to your fellow brothers and sisters who are maybe still serving or who have transitioned out?
So if there's one thing that the branches do well is we pick on each other, like sibling love. But also at the same time, no one outside of that sibling circle gets to pick on anyone else. So there's a lot of shared commonalities. Different branches have different experiences, obviously, but the service itself is the experience. And, we all have a camaraderie. We're all part of something bigger than ourselves. We're all doing something greater for the nation, or for a family or whatever. So it's really just we talk those stories, we share those stories. I got great stories from being in the cavalry that i I won't have, because I was never on a ship, that other people have. So getting to hear like these Navy people talk, or the Marines and their experiences, and how we relate combat to each other. There was a few Marines I talked to, they were in combat, and they happened to be in Fallujah at the time when I was out supporting it. And so we were talking about kind of that whole battle of Fallujah and their experience and what they did versus what I was doing. And it's a really like strong bonding factor into that. And then because of it, right, the VA is the VA no matter what branch. Now we're getting to talk about the shortfalls there. And a Marine transition different than an Army guy, but in the end it's still like, hey, I didn't know these things becoming a civilian. I didn't know what I was doing. And so it's just kind of, that's how we build that bond, that camaraderie that was there. And of course, just talking smack about each other and talking smack about, um, everyone else that's not us or didn't have the same experience. And yeah, I guess you could say the bond through blood.
Yeah. Michael Clemmer, Aerial Resupply Coffee, is very outspoken on this, and to the
Yes.
point he's got some hilarious videos out there with, some of the characters he's made up. Have you seen
Oh
some
yeah.
of his content?
I love his work. And in fact, all his stuff on LinkedIn, I always go, and I'm chiming in on it, posting on it, and I'm always trying to provoke him to do more stuff with the hammer. And um, definitely love him. And what's the other guy? Adam, who does the mandatory fun. I love
Yeah.
his stuff and watching him work. And he, if anything's happened, he is the most spot on of everything.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd definitely love to get him on here.
Oh yeah, he would be great, and he's just down to earth. He just speaks it as it is and doesn't sugarcoat it. And I'll forgive him for being an officer, but he's still a really good, really good guy.
I need to start um, like some kind of comedy relief episode on here or something, and just get some of these guys, from across the branches who just poke fun at each other on here, and just let them go at it
Oh,
a little
absolutely, absolutely.
bit.
Especially when you get that inter-service banter with each other, and you know, it just then that's when it becomes really fun and very therapeutic for us.
Yeah.
Right. I'll poke fun at Marines all day long, but I was also saying happy birthday to them on the Marine Corps birthday. And as you mentioned earlier, I was offering them rides. I said, hey, I'll be your DD tonight. Right.
Yeah.
So that way they didn't have to worry, or maybe they weren't planning on drinking and they did. And it's like, hey, you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about fumbling for an Uber or whatever. You got someone right here and get you home safe.
I kind of fall into this gray realm because I did not serve, but I was an expat civilian contractor overseas. So
Okay.
I was deployed alongside service members, and uh, and what I did, it was operations and maintenance. So we were the
Mhm.
O&M guys. They call them the fobbits. You're stuck on the fob. You're unarmed. You're behind the wire, and our job was to build and maintain the facilities so that the
Mhm.
warfighter could focus on the war. And there was a lot of cutting up, and we made great friendships um, with all of the service members. But still, there's that protective kind of order. Even when we were over there, we're not allowed to cross that line. Being
Mhm.
a civilian, we could not talk about Marines eating crayons and this kind of stuff. And in fact, there was this time there was a in Afghanistan. We were stationed in a place called Shindan Air Base, and attached to Shindan was this little fire base called Firebase Thomas, and this is
Mhm.
where your soft guys were, and they're the ones that jump out of planes and eat bugs, and that was kind of their little campground. They would come down to the main base and like steal our shit in the middle of the night. They'd break into the connexes, rip off the padlocks and steal our supplies and stuff like that. And it's fine. I mean, it's just everybody's taxpayer money, no big deal. But we would go up to Firebase Thomas for lunch because they had the best lunches. The special ops guys got
Oh
all the
yeah.
good stuff. We're still eating MREs, down at the main base, and so we'd go up there and we'd trade services that they weren't under contract for. So get some free lunch, go fix an AC unit, something like that. But still, I remember one specific time, one of our civilian guys just made the wrong comment to the wrong guy on the wrong day. And keep in mind, this guy had been out in the field. He was one of those where they just give him a picture of somebody and very little else, and he'd pack up a bag and take off and go find that fucker
Mhm.
somewhere out in the desert. And so he'd been gone 2, 3 weeks and looked emaciated. It was a long, hard journey for the guy, but he had just gotten back. And one of my asshole buddies said something snide to him like, damn, you look like shit. What have you been doing, playing video games or something like that? And
Ooh.
it got real. It got real, and it got real, real fast. And I had to just kind of jump in the middle and be the diplomat. And so, um, having not served myself, I have total respect for that camaraderie and that thin line that you have to tread to pay your respect to the people who are out there protecting us. Right. All right. Slight correction. I kind of misremembered things from that era, but the incident at the lunch hall at Firebase Thomas, really, this is what happened. So we walk in, we lunch, great stuff, walk out. We get approached by a soft guy with his canine unit who comes up and talks to us and starts kind of interrogating, what are you guys doing here? You're just civilians. You're not supposed to be on Thomas. Why are you eating my hot dogs? That kind of shit. And so it got pretty heated, and my asshole civilian buddy bowed up to him, and it became a talking point. At which time I broke it up with diplomacy, and the what I call the emaciated guy came in and also helped kind of break it up and regulate things. Now, the story about the emaciated guy, still true, just a different storyline. He had actually gone out for 2 to 3 weeks, lost like 30 to 50 pounds, like just looked like absolute hammered dog shit when he got back. And my asshole civilian buddy guy, who was also friends with him, we're all just kind of assholes, right? But, he had asked him, you know, what's the deal? You look like hell. You've been playing video games or whatever. And in a non-confrontational conversation, he explained that he had been out, hunting the bad guys, and uh, it had been it had been an adventure. So I got those memories a little mixed up. I just wanted to clear the air for the sake of integrity for our service members, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I mean, you guys played a big part of, especially in the early parts of the war anyway, because you're out there trying to build our infrastructure while we're out there trying to run missions and check on the population and make sure we're not getting attacked. So it's definitely, there's still a balance. There's a love-hate relationship there.
Mhm.
I was fortunate that one of my little fobs, Fob Normandy, we had a really good group of civilians who worked there, and they actually took care of us. They would Rippets were a thing then. Those tiny little energy drink
Rippets.
cans,
Yeah.
and we had a bunch of really good civilian guys who would come, and they would somehow would get them, and they'd see us roll back on this fob because it was a small fob, and they're like, "Hey, we got you guys something." So we'd go out in town and we'd bring them stuff back too. So it was definitely a mutual respect there. But yeah, they wouldn't banter with us the same way we would banter with each other.
Did you have exposure to any of the locals that were part of the civilian contingency on the bases? The cleaning crews and
Very minimal. I mean, I'd say the most that I ever really interacted with any of them was like the little shops that when they let the Iraqis come and post a little shop up there, and maybe I'd run into the guys doing like the cleaning, but other than that,
right.
outside of the tower guards, no.
Yeah, we had a lot of them. So in Iraq, we had at the time they called them third country nationals or
Yeah,
TCNs. So
ECNs.
yeah, we'd have our TCNs come in, and I was part of the gate crew who would do the accountability or roll call in the morning. And I mean, at this base, this was Kirkuk, Iraq. It was all Kurdish, um, and the Kurdish loved us. Very Western friendly, at least at that time. And I don't know where we stand these days, but we had upwards of 500 come in every morning, and we could get all kinds of crazy stuff. They'd bring it out of Turkey, and you can
Yeah,
get some stuff that maybe was kind of frowned upon, but it's an interesting relationship. But then fast forward a few years to '09 and 10 and Afghanistan, where I was, they had kind of abandoned the TCN method, I think, just based on local politics, because we're out
mhm,
in kind of the Farah area near Iran. And um, so a lot of the civilians out there came from Sri Lanka and Nepal and India
okay.
and some of the Eastern European countries and stuff like that. But interesting dynamic when you get all those people together on NATO base, and you've got the Italian contingency with their little fob within a fob, and they get to drink in there and eat
Yeah,
all kinds of good food, and kind of interesting mix of characters all
yeah,
over the place.
yeah. Definitely a unique experience. But though you kind of mentioned it, I loved working with the foreign militaries. Got to work with the Canadians and the Brits and uh, the Australians and the New Zealanders. Actually, they were my favorite because we had the New Zealand Air Force was supporting one of our missions, and of course, just in military banter, I had to ask the question. I was like, "Hey, you guys have a kiwi bird on the side of your aircraft, right?" They're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Why does your Air Force have a flightless bird as their mascot?" I was like, "Are you trying to tell me something? You're not going to crash here, are you?" And they're
I'm
like,
sure
"Yeah,
that went
funny."
over well.
No, they laughed about it. They're like, "Yeah, sometimes we wonder the same thing."
Yeah. So now fast forward 20 years in, and you get out. What is that process like?
Ooh. So I mean, it's a choose your own adventure story for real. So I kind of hit a point in my career, and I'm like, you know what? It's just time to go, time to retire. So I put my retirement packet in. I started doing the process. I was fortunate. I found a thing called the DoD Skill Bridge program, and the organization specifically I went through was hiring our heroes. So I got to be an intern for a company while I was transitioning out. And so it worked out really good. This communications company had picked me up through a mutual friend. And, we're talking with them, and they're like, "Hey, we want to bring you on board as a project manager." So I'm like, "Cool." So did the thing with them. And sort of towards the end, I was like, I don't think they're going to offer me a job. Communications was my specialty, and they did a lot of data center work. Well, lo and behold, they did. They offered me a job offer letter, which I was like, "Whoa, this is cool." So I had so many leave days. I had 127 leave days. So I actually got to get out, and I was on leave, terminal leave, So I was working for this company at the end of my career, which was really cool and getting to experience that civilian life. But that's when it really like hit home how different it was. Things I never had to think about before when I was in. Now I'm thinking about the whole like way the civilian population works, and the corporate dynamic was a big learning curve for me. And and honestly, I'm still kind of learning it because it's so much and it's so different. So it was a great experience with that company, and I ended up leaving them within the year, like kind of my year mark there. I departed ways with them and um, did some contracting work for the Army that I still do. But then because of that year while I was working with them, even as I transitioned, that's when I was getting those calls from those soldiers. They're like, "Hey, can you help me? Hey, can you help me?" And one of the guys I worked with, he was one of my soldiers once. He came on board, and I was helping him through his transition process as well. So it was just very like, "Hey, there's some weirdness going on," and again, not because anything's bad, but then I started noticing this big trend that all of us, all these veterans, regardless of branch or how long they serve, are leaving their jobs within a year. And I think the statistics 85% will leave in the first year, 73% leave in 18 months. And it started dawning on me and working with this company and talking to others in the industries. I'm like, hey, like there's a gap. There's a shortfall here. And it's that learning gap between what we as veterans know and do and look for versus kind of what the corporate world does and how they view leadership and operations. So that's actually kind of how Frago was born in that fray.
Yeah. So Frago, what does that stand for? You said
So
it's the
the
order.
term Frago comes out of a military term called fragmentation order. And so a fragmentation order for simplistic states is when you're on a mission and something changes, they issue you a new order because it's a change in the middle of the mission. It's called a fragmentation order. And so you'd get we'd always just dumb it down to Frago. And then the numbers always correlated with whatever version of the new mission you were on. So if this is the first change, it's the Frago 1, and it just works its way up. So, um, usually the running joke is you hear it so much, and you're trying to do stuff, and it's like, oh, another change, oh, another change. So you're like, oh, here we go, Frago 99, and so I picked 22 for a few reasons. One, the suicide rate. Two, it was just happened to be the year I retired, and loosely there's a running joke that Frago 22 was the Army's order for how they dealt with COVID,
Yeah.
which that is not completely true, but it did come out on the 22nd of April. So the 22 still stands loosely in that regard.
Interesting. What's the vision of the company?
So our vision is actually just realigning businesses and veterans in a communal pool. Now, you see a lot of great organizations out there that are going to help veterans find jobs. That's their role. That's what they do. I'm on the other half of it. So as they come into these civilian jobs, as they come into these corporations, one, the corporation's ready to receive these veterans, and they have a plan for them and how they onboard them and how they interact, and also to help the veterans transition into that new lifestyle, transition into that new role, get acclimated to this new way of life. Because your average veteran had joined the military anywhere between 18 and 24 years of age. I mean, that's the bulk of the population when they join. So it's most of their adult life, that's what they did. And so it's just, okay, hey, welcome to your new role. Here's your Frago order. You're now a civilian, and we now have a new way of doing business and how we operate. And that because I want businesses to be successful, right? When you as a business owner, you bring someone on, you're dumping money into that person, through the onboarding process, training them, getting them ready, working, equipping them with whatever they need. And the last thing you want is you spend all this money for this talent and then it leaves.
And from the perspective of the civilian who's never served or perhaps is unfamiliar, but also is in, say, human relations or in a decision-making capacity in the corporate world, and entertaining, onboarding these veterans. Um, I've heard from a couple of transitioned vets that one of the issues from their perspective was there is no playbook. Once you get out of the military, There is no playbook for whatever company you're going to join. You jump into the fire and it's a whirlwind, or if you're trying to start your own company, there's nothing out there that functions as a kind of a step-by-step checklist or roadmap. And it can be very daunting from my understanding, going from such a structured world to something that is potentially quite the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one of the big hardships for a veteran is um, we get a stigma that's put on us when a company hears, oh, I'm bringing on this person, they're a veteran or a fresh veteran, like freshly separated. There's a stigma, and it's usually that we're too rigid because of that structure we had. And so there's a lot of companies who shy away from hiring veterans because they're like, oh, they're going to come in here and they have this preconceived notion that we're going to come in and start yelling and flipping tables and all this stuff when, mostly that's not true. We're coming in to learn, we're coming in to adapt to the new mission, right? It's a new mission for us. So that's how we take it. And that's how we want to roll with it is we're not there to be the boss. We're there to accomplish the mission. And so
Well,
there's that, and there's a transition mindset that goes in there with camaraderie and working with other people.
and from my experience as well, just knowing a little bit about your day-to-day life in the military, it's all about planning and backup planning. Everything's got a plan. And there's something to be said about a person who has it ingrained in their mind to one, have a plan, two, have a contingency. And they can function anywhere in the corporate world, quite frankly, because the corporate world very rarely has the plan. And if there is one, it's in someone's shared drive somewhere that they've not shared with anyone. And there can be such high attrition and job movement within the corporate world that all those processes and structures are just gone. They're by the wayside. And they're just a checklist that someone did for a promotion 3 years ago. And now it's just utter bullshit. And it's a void in absence of any kind of process because you're just shooting it from the hip.
Mm-hmm.
And so, someone who has had a career in the military, they're used to constant change. They're used to the hurry up and wait. They're used to, um, yes, having the structural teaching, but more so the flexibility and the adaptability of those plans might change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
And
I find them extremely versatile candidates.
yeah, and for us, like everyone thinks the military runs so smooth and we have these great plans. I'm gonna tell you what, you can ask anyone from the military. 99% of our plans are in the military go to shit right away.
Yep.
Right. And that's just the truth. Like, so, we call it the enemy has a vote. So even in combat, like, here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do. We get out there and all those unknown variables happen. And we just become adapt to changing on the fly, moving on the fly, pivoting where we need to, for us, that just differs from the civilian culture is for us, we ingrain it down to the lowest soldier. Like everyone knows exactly what's going on and what the actual mission is. So that way, if leadership's wiped out, they can continue on and they're not worried about it. They're not like, okay, what do we do next? They already know. They know what they got to do to get back. So, you kind of don't see that in the civilian side and not because, well, some people are just jerks like that, but most of the time it's just because we're bred and trained from day one to be that kind of leader. And that's how we operate as in the civilian side. Your leadership training is really just through process of working. Very, very few businesses that I have seen have a full-fledged leadership structure of how they build and develop leaders and bring them up through their ranks. Some do, and they work, but most they don't.
So is that the offering then? Is that what you bring to your customers' table?
So that's one of the biggest things I bring to them is a whole leadership program and showing them how to teach, develop, train, coach, and mentor their leaders. So typically what I see, I'll go into an organizations and we'll say they have a really strong sales department or a really strong salesperson, or a really strong technician, stellar person, stellar performer. They do great. So the logical thing for them is, okay, hey, they're ready for the next level. Let's bring them up, and now they're in charge of things. The problem is the person's never had leadership training, and so they're learning by baptism by fire. They're thrown to this leadership role with all these new responsibilities and things they got to track and monitor and control and adjust, and they've never done it. They've never had that exposure, that experience. So they're trying to figure it out on the fly while still kind of trying to relate back to wherever they just came from. And it's stressful. They fall apart, and you either have someone who turns over and they're like, this is too stressful, I'm out of here, or they kind of just default back to their old role, and you have that leadership gap and void. And and no organization wants that or needs that. That's bad for business. So we come in and kind of help with that and train them up and coach them and get them ready.
And do you see this as specific to veterans in this new corporate world, or could this be compatible across that type of persona?
So it's definitely strong to start with your veteran community, again, just because that's what we do. But the byproduct of what Frago does anyway, the byproduct is it enhances your culture. So it can stream to just regular people who've never experienced the military in any way, shape, or form, because we establish that baseline process, and we teach everyone and anyone how to do it. And we even take it down to like a low level technician, and we'll show them how they should be structuring themselves to learn to get ready for those next building steps. And with that, we build a career map essentially in these industries and say, hey, look, this is how you progress, and this is how you go through the motions and learn, and it becomes very successful.
Right. So what does that look like once you're under contract? Are you embedded with the team, or I say you loosely, is your team embedded with theirs? What does that day-to-day interaction look like?
So it really just depends on the complexity. Right off the bat, we're going in, we're doing an assessment for the organization. We're getting with their leadership, their HR people, figuring out what are their goals, what are their objectives, what are the outcomes they want, and we look at the team, we look at the structure and how things operate, and we backwards plan it from the goal and say, okay, these are all the steps we need to get there, and we start implementing those. Now, if it's a very complex situation, we're going to be there most days, and we're going to be working alongside the leaders or the technicians or both. And we're going to be developing them and building with them and teaching them. If it's not very complex or they already had a strong base, we're going to give them some classes. We're going to bring them all together, teach them. We teach the executives how to actually lead from the perspective of, yes, this is your organization of however many people, but you're really only responsible for these 5. And then we take the same thing. So those directors or presidents, yes, this is still your organization and these are your departments, but you're really only responsible for these 5. And once they start breaking it down, they realize that you're actually not in charge of 100 people. You're really only in charge of 5, and it works itself out all the way down to the lowest guy. The relief they get from that, and they're like, oh, wow, this has taken a burden.
Right. Yeah. Definitely chopping the complex into manageable bite-sized pieces. That's the way to go.
Yeah. And then you start to see that team camaraderie just naturally develop, because now those individuals are really focused on those that they really personally interact with daily. So they actually get to know their team really well, and they know the personalities, they know how to work with them. They build those bonds with each other, and they become a very strong knit team. And, those who are in the military are listening to me like, bruh, you just described a platoon. Well, yeah, I did, because that's how we work, and that's why it works so well.
And you mentioned that attrition was 85%, I think is what you said. And if you consider the cost of what it takes to onboard just any new employee, in particular, someone who's coming out of the military, so is slightly more experienced and at potentially a higher pay grade than, your entry level candidates, the cost of onboarding is a great expense to any team. And so if you're able to help retain even 10, 20% more of them, then your service must pay for itself in some way, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, so one of the first companies I worked with was a data center. And just for their normal attrition, so this doesn't count in a veteran or non-veteran, it's just equal numbers across the board. The average data center professional will cost I'm pulling it up right now to give you the exact number. It was about $10,000 per person. So it really broke down to oops, I'm looking at the wrong one here. There we go. So it was $10,000 a person, and that's for basic level technicians. By the time they came in, they onboarded, they got their certification to work, and then started working, plus 6 months of pay. I mean, just in the investment cost to bring that person on board, you've lost 10 grand. And if that's happening every 6 months, 8, 9, 10 people later, right? 10 people later, that's $100,000 you just lost. And for no reason. And the worst part is if they go to your competitor.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So your offering then is to come in, fix the structure to help that retention rate, therefore saving your money in the process, as well as fixing perhaps larger challenges within the corporate culture. So it might not just be one head that you're saving. It may be entire teams. It may be a ripple effect into the future of the culture and the teams.
Yep. And that's really what I want for these businesses, especially because a lot of them are really good. They have really good people. So it's, hey, you guys aren't doing anything wrong. We're just taking the skills you had and we're augmenting them. We're strengthening them. So you can tackle these things from a new, fresh perspective. And, it's very successful. And the benefit is as we implement things, my company, we're there the whole time to, okay, hey, this isn't working. We need to adjust again. Or it's working, but is it getting the results, the exact results we wanted? Do we need to refine it, make it stronger, adjust it? And, we're there every step of the way for them.
What was it for you that was the catalyst to start your own business specifically? You tried out working for the corporate world, didn't quite work out, but that kind of exposed you to the problem. But sure, you've got the problem and perhaps you're thinking of a solution, but then there's that other awkward step of actually stepping off the ledge and free falling into this potentially catastrophic world of entrepreneurialism. What the hell were you thinking, John?
Well, seeing as I used to jump out of planes for a living, I just assumed it couldn't be any worse than doing that. So, but a lot of it is like, it's I see a problem and I want to try to help solve it. And, I'm pretty sure I could have told this to a plethora of people and, someone probably would have picked it up and ran with it. But if I've seen the problem, why don't I just go ahead and take care of it? And, working for people is fine. It's great. But here's something I could directly control and change, and I could be impactful, and I could help a lot of other people in the process. I could help these veterans and help them streamline into different careers and industries. And I can help businesses realize the talent that's out there that they may be shying away from, or they may just not know how to utilize. And that could be huge game changers for them. So why not? In the end of the day, for me, it's all about people, helping people, whether side of the field they're on, because there's always a benefit to it.
Are you aware of if there's any government grant or anything that might apply to what you're doing out there, or have you entertained a lobby effort, being kind of in the heart of where you are geographically?
So I have not entertained a lobby effort, which anyone who knew me growing up would be surprising because I was the government kid. Like I liked government. In fact, my all my degrees through college are all government related. Political science, both my master's and my bachelor's are in political science and public policy and stuff like that. So my thing is, maybe I'll eventually journey to that realm or get in with some of those big people who are already just very entrenched in there. Because I don't need to recreate the wheel for no reason, especially when great organizations are already out there doing it. Right. So I try to link in with those, your VFWs and your legions and stuff like that. So definitely talking with them. But I do know there are various benefits for businesses that they get tax write-offs for hiring certain veterans and skilled veterans and service disabled veterans. And in the contracting world, like a business that's a service disabled veteran owned business, like Frago 22 is, I'm considered service disabled, so I'm veteran owned. And I get different benefits for that. There's huge benefits for women owned businesses and women veteran businesses. So they're out there, and it's a lot of people don't know that. And yes, the information may have been provided at one point, but if you couldn't decipher it from all the other information you got, it's that learning curve. And I'm learning every day. And people like Michael Clemmer, he's brought up some stuff, and I'm like, whoa, hang on, I need to look into that now too. And so that's what I love about the veteran community, where we'll share it too, and we'll grow each other.
All right, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
Main dish, side dish, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, I'm all about the mac and cheese. Oh. I will crush some mac and cheese all day long.
Let's plug you appropriately. Where can people find you, and what's your call to action? What do you need?
So you can find me. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can book appointments directly from there. My website, Frago 22. And in fact, the benefit, we just redesigned it. So if you haven't checked it out yet, you need to go check it out, because we made it more user-friendly and streamlined. The second you get on the website, you're given a choice. Are you a veteran or are you a business? And it's going to take you through the appropriate menus for which side you click. And so definitely link in with me there, LinkedIn. My call to action here is like, hey, let's find meaningful work and employment for people, for the veterans who want to work, but also let's build your culture to be a strong, developed culture that really wants to grow and flourish and have people excited to come to work and be there and be a part of this mission and something bigger. Because no matter where you work, you're part of something bigger. Do you just show up there and, okay, or I'm going home, or are you like, hey, let's get this thing going. Let's grow this. Let's celebrate our victories in advance.
John, I'm very thankful for you. I'm thankful for the service that you're offering to both those transitioning out of the military, but also those of us civvies in the corporate world. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. Any parting thoughts?
Whew. I mean, I would say, hey, in the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? And no one should be alone, whether you're a veteran or whether you're a civilian, right? Don't go at these things alone. Let's work together. You have a partner, and guess what? Usually together. What's the quote from Planet of the Apes? Apes together strong. Right, we're the same thing, especially as veterans. Veterans together strong. So just definitely support each other. Let's get out there and keep moving forward.